So that's everybody who's at the meeting, and I'm glad to see everybody. And again, I'm John, and I get to lead the meditation tonight. And I was excited when I heard it was interconnections or connections. I went interconnections. And beautifully, I read a not too old, but a little bit of an old article that was in Lion's Roar, and about someone who was talking about this. And her name is Rebecca Solnit. And she's written some books, and she spoke a lot about the idea in this interview about everything is interconnected, everything changes, and putting those together. Everything changes, everything's interconnected. So just from my perspective, interconnection is the root of compassion. And this is in her article, actually. Her quote on this is, "The coolness of Buddhism isn't indifference, but the distance we gain on emotions, the quiet place from which to regard the turbulence. From far away, you see the pattern, the connections, and the thing as a whole. See all the islands and the roots between them." So a few things I just read about that. When we meditate, we have that opportunity to pull away from ourselves and see ourselves as part of everything else, and also just to have see our reactions from a distance. And I'm really cautious, only because a long time ago, I wish, I've had two sponsors who practice Zen, and the first one said not to expect anything from meditation. And he's a long-time practitioner. Don't expect anything, he said. And I was reading a lot of the science stuff, and I hear, oh, the health benefits, right? Lower blood pressure, live longer, more peaceful, better mental health. So I was looking for all these results. But this sponsor said, don't worry about the results. You'll get what you get. Which, does that sound very reassuring to anyone in here? Because to me, it wasn't totally reassuring. And I did what they said because I do know they had something I wanted. So they knew what they were talking about. So I sat. And now I'm very cautious. Well, one thing, I'm very cautious to expect meditation is to make me calm. Sometimes when I meditate, I may want to run out and set something on fire. Because I'm observing the world as it is and what's happening, and I'm observing my reaction to it. And that's not a calming experience. It's a very hard experience. And I have sat with cravings that made me not feel calm. And I have sat with hatred that did not make me feel calm. And I have sat with anger that did not make me feel calm. And understanding it did help me to be compassionate. That distance allows me to be compassionate. But I do not always expect to be calm. Equanimity is not necessarily calmness. Equanimity means I will see something without having aversion or attachment to what I am seeing. But it does not necessarily mean calmness. My equanimity may be action. We need to do action. Equanimity, it's easy to say it's not action, but it's action. And sometimes what we learn from viewing interdependence in our mindfulness states is that we need to have mindful, compassionate actions. We need to do something. So the fruit of Buddhism is not indifference. The next thing, and man, I love Buddhism and I love these big fancy words. I think this one has close to 30 letters, so please be patient with me. It's Pratityasamat Samutpeda. Pratityasamutpeda. It means dependent origination, or another translation is interdependent arising. I like interdependent arising because if you just have dependent origination, if I can get stuck on seeing something as the main object and everything influences it. But if I see interdependent arising, then the thing I'm observing is being influenced by everything, but is also influencing everything in turn. This is very important because interdependent arising again says everything changes constantly. Everything arises constantly, without end. There are no permanent stable things. And we hear that throughout Buddhism and so many other spiritual traditions. Everything continuously arises. Empathy arises through the understanding of interconnectedness. Again, to quote Rebecca Solnit in the article I'd read out of, there's so many different Buddhists. This one's Lion Roars. Whole societies can be taught to deaden feeling, to disassociate from their marginal and minority members, just as people can and do erase the humanity of those close to them. Empathy makes you imagine the sensation of the torture, of the hunger, of the loss. You make that person into yourself. You inscribe their suffering on your own body or heart or mind. And then you respond to the suffering as though it were your own. This is really important, and I really do like the meditations where we do focus on other people. Metta meditation is one. But it brings it home where I put myself into where they're at. So I imagine someone who is very different from me, maybe spiritually or politically or culturally or ethnically, and imagine myself as them. And even if I had these opinions, which I see as wrong, right? But I'm not right about everything, so I'm wrong too. But I see as wrong from my view, I see as wrong. I can still be in their shoes and recognize how they're feeling and how I would want to be treated if I were them, if I were wrong. And it wouldn't be to be preached to or bludgeoned or judged. That's not right communication. It's not respecting another human being. So I can view someone as being grievously wrong and still connect with them. An important thing I read, I remember reading Thich Nhat Hanh, and I know a lot of you know Thich Nhat Hanh in here. Thich Nhat Hanh had this long segment I was reading and said he could be all these things. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, how he could see himself being a murderer, how he recognizes that there is a murderer inside of him and that he is capable of murder, that he's capable of all these terrible things. And I think that came from deep contemplation and observing himself from a distance and seeing how he is no different than anyone else. If the conditions were different, he recognizes that he could be a murderer. I'm grateful that he's not. I've learned so much from him. And I think it's important that I recognize that, because it allows me to see people with compassion and not judgment. I remember in 1996, I got this brand new book from QPR, quality paperback. It was a book club. And QPR had these great books. And this book was called The Web of Life. And it changed profoundly how I view the world. And it was a science book. But the science book taught me what I believe to be spiritual. I know we don't use that in Buddhist a lot, but I will say a non-scientific reality maybe. Well, it is a scientific reality, but what my view of how the universe essentially is. The Web of Life wrote again about systems theory and talked about how whole ecosystems arise with every inhabitant. The fungus, the algae, the lichen, the plants, the bugs, the birds, the mammals, all the animals, everything that grows and eats, working together, and they maintain a balance. That if I were to look at a jungle, it's not just a bunch of trees, but it's thousands of species of plants and animals that rely on each other to survive. Systems theory says an apple tree exists to give animals food. And because of its usefulness to give animals food, it propagates. Its seeds spread. Those animals exist to spread the seeds of the apple tree. Everything exists to play its part within that system. Interdependent arising. It also made me more alarmed by what we as humans have done to the environment. My last quote I have, I keep on having to look at her name, I'm sorry guys. From Miss Solnit, I'll say Miss Solnit, just a short one. She goes, "Let's talk about climate change as violence." And that was in her book, The Encyclopedia of Trouble and Spaciousness. So if my behavior in any way harms anything in the web of interdependent arising, it can be an act of violence. What we call passive aggression is aggression. If I act out on my greed to accumulate more than I need, then I participate in an activity that causes destruction to the biggest system that we know as a living system, and that's the planet Earth. The system will change, as all things change, but this change could be catastrophic to billions of animals and possibly billions of people. She says, let's talk about climate change as violence. I want to just say a beautiful Native American quote that goes along with that and how we have the climate. It says, I hope I don't offend anyone with this, but it says, white people are very good at producing, but very bad at distributing. And that distribution could be seen as distributing to a point where we are hurting our own home. My last quote comes from my dad. He said, "Don't shit where you eat." I think that's what it comes down to when our consumerism affects the environment. So interdependent arising. I want to do a chant. No one has to chant. You can just meditate or listen. If you want to chant, that's incredible. In celebration of interdependent arising, and I'm, brought up a little bit of social justice, and I did bring up environmental change. I want to do Tara because I believe, a feminine perspective of Buddhism would be helpful in that, helping us heal and deal with these issues. So, if you want to go, it's the simple chant. It's from Tibetan Buddhism. Om Tara Tutere, Tutere Swaha. Om Tare Tutare Ture 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 Swaha. One last one. Om Tare Tutare Ture Swaha. Just take a few moments, few breaths. Namaste. And so prepare for dedication of merit. This is my favorite dedication of merit. May all places be held sacred. May all beings be cherished. May all injustices of oppression, devaluation, and theft be fully righted, remedied, and healed. May all who are captured by hatred be freed to the love that is our birthright. May all who are bound by fear discover the safety of understanding. May all who are weighed down by grief be given over to the joy of being. May all who are lost in delusion find a home on the path of wisdom. May all wounds to forest, rivers, deserts, ocean, all wounds to Mother Earth be lovingly restored to bountiful health. May all beings everywhere delight in whale song, bird song, and blue sky. May all beings abide in peace and well-being. Awaken and be free. Namaste.